All right, guys, here we are back for another episode of the Lift Others Up podcast. Super excited to have Steve Acho here with us. And Steve, I'm going to give you a quick introduction and then we'll hop right into the conversation. But Steve is a keynote speaker, business owner, coach, author, self-taught musician whose songs have reached over 50 million streams globally. Athlete, tech enthusiast, and self-described lunatic for human performance. His passion is sharing actionable wisdom, perspectives, and tactics to enhance the quality of as many lives as possible. That's quite the introduction there, Steve. I love that, and the fact that you're trying to enhance as many lives as possible. That's what we're all about here at Lift Others Up, and that's why I was so excited to have you on. So welcome to the Lift Others Up podcast.
Thank you so much. Let's
Yeah.
do some lifting.
Yes, for sure. Love it, man. So I always like to start with kind of the background, right? Who you are, where you're from, and how you arrived, kind of where you're at now with helping people, and then we can get into the conversation.
Sure. So I was born in Detroit and have lived in Detroit area in Michigan for all of my life, other than two separate times that I lived in Japan. Once when I was 19 and 20 years old, and then again when I was older, and I did my MBA there, and I worked for the president of Mazda and spent about 4 years, and got to travel and do lots of great things. But in my adult life, I've always been lucky enough to travel to different places, to be exposed to different languages, to be able to kind of do all of the things that I do in my multiple businesses and travel for that reason. So, I've done music shows in other countries and been on TV in Japan doing music. And other than about 5-6 years in Japan, I've lived in Detroit and traveled throughout the U.S. and stuff. My father was an immigrant. He came from Baghdad, from Iraq. His family was very much persecuted and tried. I think they applied 18 years in a row for a visa and finally got one, which was only for my grandfather to come over, and then he had to save money and send for everyone else. So although I did not grow up with that background, I've been exposed to that kind of thinking and everything. And, my dad's one of my heroes. I mean, he came here at 10, 11 years old, speaking no English, and ended up getting all A's and scholarships and got his master's in engineering and business, and ended up at Ford Motor Company and working for Bill Ford before he retired. And he's always super active and super smart. And so I am fortunate enough to have won the parent lottery. So I have some great parents that support me, and a sister that does too.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Love to hear that about your dad. And some of my closest friends are from the same area, and one has passed away several years ago now, but I called him Amu and he called me Brony. And
that's so great.
Yeah, just an awesome guy, awesome relationship. And
Yeah.
that story of people coming here, especially if from a position of being persecuted and making a life for their families, just awesome. So that's so cool. You have the gratitude for that, and I'm sure that helped shape all the accomplishment that you've been able to do here. That's awesome, man. Real quick, before I get into some of the questions about business and singing and all these different things you got going on, how was that experience living in Japan? I've never lived abroad. I had a brother that lived in another country for 8 years, so I've always been a little curious about people's experience. So how was living in Japan?
Yeah, well, I ended up being at one of the 3 high schools in Michigan that taught Japanese way back, way back. And so I had 2 years of Japanese lessons in school, in high school, before my first trip to Japan with my karate instructor when I was 17, I think, just for a couple weeks. And I just fell in love with it. And I also realized that taking classes, even though they're well intended, I don't think textbook Spanish or textbook Japanese or anything does much to prepare you for real conversation. And we can get into that later. But I love so many aspects of the culture. It's like my second home. There's so many things that I love. And I think being exposed to another culture, especially for a long time, not just 2 or 3 weeks where you notice the obvious things, the smells, the dress, the money's different, all that stuff you notice. But when you're there for a while, you really it forces you to get exposure to things that make you understand that the way that we grew up influences what we think is normal.
Hmm.
And so there's so many cultural and language things I could go on for an hour about that are just, why would they do that? And then I think about how we do that in America and I go, wait, why do we do that? And then some that are the other way around. But there's something about being immersed in another culture. And I probably would have gone nuts if I didn't speak the language. I learned the language and I did it in college and got myself through as an interpreter and translator, and did some other things there. But speaking the language and then later on being in an office with hundreds of other Japanese people where everything was in Japanese, everything, your phone calls, your emails, your meetings, I was at my linguistic breakdown every day. And so I ended up creating for myself a methodology for second language learning and copyrighted it. And I've tested it on probably 15 people personally. And now there are U.S. military members that use it and global teachers. And so I love sharing that with people. I've actually done a couple coaching sessions in the last month with people who are like, I really want to learn, whatever it is, Spanish or Russian or whatever. My wife is Russian, and I want to be able to understand her better and talk to her parents, and I think they're excited because they see that it actually doesn't take years and years and years to be functionally fluent. Um, but certainly being surrounded by it and then having a system to work for you, um, you see daily progress, and other people do too. Other people notice it. So for me, there's so many things that in my head I always think like that's my Japanese part coming out,
Hmm.
and then other times I'm like that's me being an American, and it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just something you notice. So
Hmm. Very cool.
yeah, and I find a lot of people, a lot of Americans that go to Japan are, for some reason, it's like love it or hate it. They're
Hmm.
either like, I'm going to move back and I'm going to marry a Japanese woman and I'm going to stay in Japan, or they're like, I can't wait to get out of here. It's so
Hmm.
crowded. And, I never hear like, it was okay. Like people love it, or they're kind of like, ugh, too different.
That's really interesting.
So I was in the
Yeah.
love it category, but I don't want
Yeah.
to live there forever, but be
Yeah.
good to go back. And I've been able to go back and visit friends and do business since living there.
Wow, that's very interesting. So there's a saying, experience changes perspective, and that's what I'm reminded of when I hear
Mm,
this idea that to be immersed in another culture changes your experience, which allows you to have new perspective, which sounds like is part of what helps you develop this methodology, right? Is
for
that
sure.
experience and then having to adapt. And
And yeah, that's the right word. I mean,
mhm.
I actually, in trying to adapt, I'm like a very big experimenter, like tester. Like I never understood the the fear people have around failure because and now they fetishize failure. They're like fail faster and it's all good and you like there's different versions of that, but it almost doesn't come up in my head because everything I do is kind of like an experiment. So it's not like, oh, I failed. I tried this and I failed. I really am thinking like, okay, I had one idea out of 100 and it ended up like I learned this about it, but I don't feel like I failed that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
just having that mentality of like you get a new perspective, like you said, and then you want to adapt to whatever the circumstances are and you find a way to do it. And so being an experimenter, I like quickly figure out what the best way is. And then what I personally love doing is just sharing it with other people, like deconstructing and simplifying whatever it is that I finally discovered. And so I believe that where it took me 3 or 4 years to get in fluency in Japanese, I could get someone in 3 or 4 months.
wow.
And I think that's important. It's not just like, so what if I learned how to do something, if I can't pass on a way for people to be able to do it more efficiently or better. So that's part of what motivates me, I guess.
That's interesting because for me and for a lot of the listeners, we're in a business where duplication is really important, right? So it's not just what works, it's what duplicates. And so I think that's going to ring true for a lot of people listening.
Mm.
So I know we've kind of talked offline, and looking at my notes here, it says common misconceptions in goal setting and achievement. I'd love to cover that
Sure.
because we're in a business, and really everybody's kind of in this goal setting and achievement chase, right?
Of course.
So what's can you touch on that for us briefly?
For sure. So I think many people are familiar with the SMART goals framework, SMART. So it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And I think that's a very good methodology for creating goals. So in other words, you don't say, I want to lose weight. You say, I'm going to lose 30 pounds by October 1st. And then it, kind of hits all those, it checks all those boxes. And even though that is a good way to set goals, there there isn't really one method that says, or framework that says, okay, now you've identified what you're going to do. How are you going to do it? And so the first part of that really does involve kind of the SMART method, but I kind of zero in on a couple of them. And the first one is the specific, and then the next one is the relevant, so the S and the R. I think too often people pick goals because they're popular or because they're easy to measure. And both of those things do not make something worthy of your attention or of a goal. So, what do I mean by that? Most people, I believe, who say, I want to lose weight, don't actually mean I want to lose weight. They don't care. The only two groups that I believe should care about their weight is if you're morbidly obese, it's certainly a very good metric. And if you're a fighter and you have to weigh in on Friday for your middleweight bout and your job depends on you weighing a certain amount, you better be that weight. For everyone else, I believe that what they mean is I want to feel better and I want to look better in my jeans and I want to get rid of my beer belly or look great in a bathing suit. And I think whatever it is, just own it. Just mean it and own it. And so if someone were to come to me with the goal, I want to lose weight, I would push back and say, is that really what you want? And once we got to the real thing, I would say, okay, so have your pair of high school jeans out on day one. Try to pull them up. You can't? No problem. That's where we're starting. Take a picture of yourself in your bikini or bathing suit or whatever. It's only for you. Front, side, back. Put it away. Don't look at either one. Now let's get on with the what to do. And in 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to come back and you will see progress. So I think the first thing is just we confuse easy to measure and popular with being useful to measure. And there's so many examples of that. It's just the scale is an easy one, right? It's so easy to just step on the scale and say, I weigh 190 pounds and I would rather weigh 170. And it's easy to measure that. But calories, we measure calories. There's a funny, like a cartoon strip with this guy who's crawling on his hands and knees in the middle of a parking lot at night. And this police officer comes and says, sir, are you okay? And he says, yeah, I lost my car keys. And he was like, oh, I'll help you. You lost them in the parking lot? He's like, actually, I lost them across the street in the park, but this is where the light is. And it's kind of a joke about like, well, we're just going to measure where it's easy to measure. It's easy to look here, but I'm not going to find my keys. It's not effective, right? So I think there are a lot of examples where I would push back on what the goals are. And this could be, I'll give you a business example too. In our IT staffing company, we are in a position to, get candidates to our clients. So our clients will say, we need someone with X amount of years in this skill and X amount of years of that skill. And I kind of consult and turn it around on them so that they recognize that that's not what they want. They don't want someone with 10 years of sales experience. What they want is an outcome. They want someone who can grow sales 30% this year. And so now the conversation changes because we're talking about an outcome, not just easy to measure. If you worked for a company for 10 years and you were a sales manager, easy to measure, easy to see. I can call, I can verify, all that stuff's easy. It doesn't make it effective. And so once in that example, if you get around to the outcome that you're looking for, now you can use the great technology that we have and actually have human conversations with people instead of just having a list of skills that you must have to be considered for this, right?
Hmm.
Which, by the way, isn't a job description. It's so funny
Right.
when I see job description and they say 5 years of this and masters in computer science, and none of that had anything to do with the description of a job. They were just attributes, right? So you can have better human conversations with people who will find meaningful work, and their employers will be so happy to have found them.
Hmm.
If you just change the what is the outcome that you want, though, you're coming to me because you have a business problem and I'm solving it in the form of a person, and you think that your goal is to find someone with 10 years of X experience, and I'm saying, if you know, what is the outcome that you want? And then you'll have a conversation with someone where both of you will interview each other and decide if it's a good fit. But I'm going to send you someone because I believe they're capable of achieving that outcome, and I'll tell you why. Here's 3 bullet points. And that they're motivated to do this job with you as opposed to any job anywhere.
Hmm.
And because of that, we have like a 9 out of 10, like 90% of like candidates that we pitch end up getting a job offer when
Wow.
they follow that format. The average in the industry is 1 out of 10.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. So a couple words jumped out there is like meaningful, right? Like having these meaningful
Mm.
conversations, deciding what matters most. And it reminds me of kind of the Simon Sinek start with why,
Start with why. It's great.
and yeah, so that's powerful both with weight loss and employment. That's very cool. So let me ask you this. So we talked about kind of your experience and how it shaped your methodology for language. Do you, and I know that you're a very accomplished musician. I've seen, got to watch a couple of your performances, including on your TED Talk, which was really cool. Do you feel like there's a connection between language and music? Like, is there a similar experience there as far as learning and teaching?
For me personally, if I turn the magnifying glass on myself, what I recognize is that any version of talent that I have in music or with language has nothing to do with music or language. It has to do with the fact that I was just born with a good ear. So I can like imitate accents. I can do other people's accents, like as a joke. Or if you tell me something in Swahili or a language that I've never heard before, it'll take me a couple minutes, but I will sound like a native speaker with what you just gave me. I might not know what I'm saying without studying it, but I have a good ear for that. And so when I actually took one piano lesson when I was 7 years old because I saw my cousin play piano and sing a Beatles song, and I was like, that is so cool. And I went to one class. I was the youngest one there. There's a very accomplished teacher, and we spent 40 minutes learning how to sit and put your hands, and he talked about music theory and major and minor scales and progressions. And I mean, it was just like, and I thought I was the only one in the room that felt like this was astrophysics. So I left there in tears, and I left there knowing that not only couldn't I do music, I wasn't even smart enough to understand it. And I never thought about it again. That just became my self-limiting belief for 10 years till I was 17, and my parents took my sister and I to a Billy Joel concert. And I was like, that is so cool. This guy was standing up and playing the piano. We had a piano at home, so I just started putting records on and like playing with a couple fingers and then more, and kind of doing whatever I could to try and make it match, make the sound match. And then I went to a good friend of mine who is a musician and is brilliant. And he's like, and I told him the story of like the only music lesson I had ever had. And he's like, dude, you're making this way too complicated. He's like, let me show you what to do. Like, this is what a chord is. You need to learn a handful of chords and you'll be able to play lots of songs. Start like this. And he just gave me like these sheets that had pictures of like C major, and it would have like C, E, and G, the little red dots on, so you could see it. And so I learned a bunch of those, and then I started to understand basic music theory the more I played. But I didn't, I mean, that in and of itself was kind of my introduction without knowing it to the 80/20 principle, right? To the Pareto law. And it's music is such a great example, and so is language, to be honest, because I always give the stat. So there are 250,000 words in American English. But for most people, even people like me who have advanced degrees, who communicate for a living, I've been writing a blog every week for 8 years. I mean, I think about communicating, and I try to get better at it. I'm hopefully better at it this month than I was last month. And someone like me, who's a native speaker of English, only uses about 1,000 words. Now, I know more than that. I just don't use them, right? And everyone's in that state, by the way. With your native language or with your second language, you're always in a state of knowing more than you can actually say. So, but doesn't that just that fact, right? Just that fact in and of itself, before I ever taught anyone, here's how you go about becoming functionally fluent in a language. Just sit back and appreciate the fact that if you're a Chinese person that has never been exposed to English and now you're coming to America, you're basically going to have to learn English because no one around you is going to speak Chinese. And all you know is there's 250,000 words. But then you find out that merely dozens of words, really, like hundreds for me, hundreds of words, you'll sound like me, right? Dozens of the right words in the right context for you based on your persona and who you're talking to and what you're talking about, you will be functionally fluent. And if you use this certain methodology, you're exposed to the same things and you keep growing. Like the language learning keeps growing out of the things that you're naturally exposed to, as opposed to just having flashcards that have random words and sentences that are trying to teach attributes. So you might learn the sentence, he has a pink ashtray. I don't think I've ever said that sentence in my life.
Right.
I just said it now, but I've never said it. Probably will never say it again, right? But if I say something that I'm likely to say in the next week or hear, that's going to so quickly reinforce it, right? So anyways, to answer your original question about music and language, I think the thing that I was born with is just a good ear.
Yeah.
Also, I'm just naturally uh, curious, and I want to deconstruct like how do you actually hack your way to this outcome? And I don't mean hack like skip the stuff that you should do. I just mean like what's the best path? What's the most efficient path to being effective? So you can't have efficiency without effectiveness.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So I'm thinking about that Billy Joel moment you had, and it's like without that, would you have even pursued music,
No,
right?
no,
And so it's
correct.
amazing how like these moments in our life, it was like that one class or lesson versus Billy Joel. It's like some people only have the one experience or the other experience, and so
Yeah.
that's really interesting. By the way, as far as language is concerned, I've had that exact experience with Duolingo. I've spent a lot of time on Duolingo, and I know how to say, the sheep plays a violin by the lake. I don't know
Yeah.
why I would need to know how to say that, but if I need
Highly
that,
unlikely
if
that
right,
would come up. Yeah.
and it's
I think
frustrating
with
when you're trying to learn.
Duolingo,
Yeah,
I understand what they're doing, and I
yeah,
don't I don't want to speak negatively about it because I think it's great that
yeah,
anyone wants to learn a foreign language. But in general, I think the way that they teach music and foreign language is they stress the attributes too much. And the attributes of music are like tempo and sitting, and if I'm playing the piano, like where I put my hands, and all of that stuff is super important. But they're attributes. So like, what are the attributes in language, right? So there's pronunciation, there's grammar, there's inflection, there's vocabulary, there's all these different attributes, and they're trying to expose you to the attributes. And I say, if you're going to practice attributes, why don't you practice them on sentences that you'll actually say?
right.
I remember, so I tried to apply this method that I learned on myself for Mandarin Chinese. So I did like a 10-week course. I had a teacher, and I said, "You don't have to prepare anything. I'm going to come up with everything I want you to teach me." And I remember I was reading in a book, and it just happened to have this sentence that says, "I am Dr. Gao's wife." Okay, so I'm thinking, obviously we know why they put that in there. It's because it's a grammatic structure. It's not past tense. It's not future tense. It's not a question. Now I learned the vocabulary words, but I will never be Dr. Gao's wife. I mean, highly unlikely. If I am,
Right.
we're going to do a separate podcast on a different
Right.
topic.
And that's okay.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
It's
Right.
highly unlikely that I will ever utter that sentence. So we
Right.
might as well say, my name is Steve Acho. I grew up in Detroit. Where apply all of those attributes. For music, it's like timing is super important. I'm not saying to skip it. I'm saying go play Let It Be like the first hour, and you're going to get that your timing is off, and you're going to get where it's off. You're going to hear it because you know what the song sounds like. And if that's what you want to do, we're going to learn it this way. So I just think it's a little bit backwards. And it also, and this is most important, I think, it's basically teaching someone who really wants to learn how to swim, but not letting them go in the water for 6 months. Like, how motivated are they going to be, right? The person that's been studying, X language for 6 months shows up at a party and they're like, "Hey, this is my friend Steve. Hey, Steve, you speak Portuguese, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And then I just sound like an idiot because I can say the 10 sentences that it'd be like an American saying, or someone learning English saying, 4 score and 7 years ago. It's like,
Right.
okay, you memorized the speech. That's great.
Yeah.
Your pronunciation's good. But like apply the pronunciation to things you're actually going to say and repeat, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I think about that.
No, that's great. That's it's very interesting. I have a good buddy of mine is Puerto Rican, and he says more later in English because they say más tarde is
Más tarde, yeah.
more later. And
Right.
so when he says more later in English, it's like, hey, that works. You know what I mean? Like I know what he means. He's
Hmm.
expressing it to me, and it doesn't even need correction in my opinion because it's
Right.
like, yeah, you mean later, but more later works fine. Like you expressed your thought. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
That's very
And the
interesting.
truth is there isn't a correct way to speak. I mean, we all learned English in school, like grammar, but most of us break the rules most of the time, and we'd probably sound a little weird or uppity if we didn't break the rules as much as we did, right?
Right.
And so I don't know if we talked about this before, but what's the goal of communication? I mean, this is a big question with a short answer. Did we talk about this?
I don't think so.
So, what is the goal of communication? It's a two-word answer. What do you think?
2 words. I mean, the first things that come to mind are either to express or to understand, but I don't think that's it. So I'll defer to you on here. I'm interested to hear
Those
this.
are, yeah, those are outcomes of that. So, the goal of communication is shared understanding. That's it.
No, it's
I mean,
beautiful.
if somebody goes like this, and they don't know that it means peace, or someone puts their middle finger up and you don't know what it means, there was no shared understanding. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It
Right.
doesn't have to be true or false. But the whole goal of communicating in the first place is just to share understanding. So if I say sandwich, you have an idea in your head of what a sandwich is. That's all. If you don't speak English and you don't know that word, we're not sharing understanding. So if you back it up to that, then you think like, well, we all speak a dialect. All of us do. There is no one right thing. And if you can functionally get yourself across to people, then great. I think, you're doing it. For someone like me, I wanted to get better at it. Like I wanted to be better. I wanted people to notice that I was better next month than I am this month. And they did because of this crazy thing that I figured out. And I was like, I wonder if this is repeatable. And so I taught it to a handful of other people. And it's something I've actually done coaching sessions on before. In the last 2 weeks, I've done 3 for people that want to learn language. And a couple months ago, I did one with a gentleman who's from Venezuela. He's native Spanish speaker. He's been in the United States for 20 years, He still has a thick accent. He's understandable. You don't have to, you know, he has a good command of the language, but he doesn't feel confident. And he has 200 Native American speaking like Americans that work for him, right? He doesn't feel confident in talking to them. He doesn't feel confident when there's a problem with a client and he has to go talk to the general manager. And so I just gave him kind of homework to do after I sussed out of him what kinds of situations he finds himself in most of the time. Again, 80-20. Like what are you most likely to be talking about in the next month, right? What situations are you in where you feel like you're not as confident? So let's talk about those. What happens? What do you want to say? What are most of the problems that happen? I bet there's not 50. I bet there's two. I bet there's two things your customers complain about. What are they? And then
Right.
that, and I had 2 sessions with him, and that's all he needed. And he wrote me back a month later, and he was like, "Thank you so much. I'm not. I'm in meetings now with clients, and I'm not nervous, and I'm not, freaking out and thinking of the next thing I have to say. I'm just present with them and listening." And so, I mean, so glad I could just kind of tweak what he already had and allow him to just let that tweak, up his game, basically, right?
Yeah. No, that's really cool. So it reminds me of Covey, like begin with the end in mind. That's very powerful.
For
And
sure.
you may have touched on this already, but I see something else here I want to hit on, and that's the key to sustaining intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
That we kind of hit on that with talking about the employee and the person wanting to lose weight, or does it go deeper than that with
I
intrinsic
think it's
motivation?
deeper than that
Okay.
because motivation is a tough thing. It's a tough concept. So you can be motivated by your heroes. You can be motivated by wanting people to be proud of you. You can be motivated by, I'm doing this for this person. Like Simon Sinek would say, find your why. And if you have a why that's strong enough, you can sustain any what. That's what he says. And I think that is true. However, I also believe that most people, when they're trying to learn any new skill, and it has to be intrinsically motivated. At some point, it's not going to be enough to say I'm doing it for that reason. And most people, including me, will quit if they don't feel like they're making progress. And that is the source of true motivation, I believe. It's intrinsic, it's in you, it doesn't require anyone else. Because the truth is that knowledge, they say knowledge is power, right? I say knowledge is the potential, stored potential for power.
Hmm.
Potential does not pay the bills. So applying knowledge in a way that serves you and others, that's power. So the truth is that knowledge doesn't really doesn't motivate you to get to the next step, to continue doing the things that you're doing to try and get better. The thing that motivates you every time is the belief in what is possible for you. And so when I say that, I am not just reciting the Henry Ford, if you think you can and you think you can't, then you're right. Because I don't think that I understand it, and I think it's a good quote, but it's not enough to motivate you. Who are you to know whether you think you can? Right? Why do you think you can or can't? Is it just more umph? Is it waking up earlier? Is it harder work? Like, why do you think you can or can't? And I believe the answer to that is if you do something or some things that allow you to see progress as quickly as possible, that is the source of intrinsic motivation, and you will not quit. So
Hmm.
now the same person standing at a party who's done 6 months of French or Japanese or German or whatever, and they say, "Hey, this is Steve, and he speaks, Portuguese," and then I have a conversation, I'm going to feel good about myself. I'm going to think like, that's the first time I've been tested, and I feel like I've made progress. That person is going to keep doing it, and the person that is has just memorized a bunch of speeches is going to kind of feel dumb, right? And not
Yeah.
which I did. I mean, I had 2 years of Japanese. I went to Japan for my first time. And I would ask a police officer in pretty good Japanese, like, "Hey, which way to the hotel?" And then he would point, and I had no idea what he was saying. I couldn't pick up a single word. I was just
Hmm.
following his finger, and I was like, "This can't be. the right way to do this.
Yeah.
Like, how do people actually talk? Like, what are the possible answers to where is the bathroom?
Right.
There's only so many things that someone can say. What kinds of things are they likely to say? Because I'm likely to hear that in the next 24 hours, right? If I'm
Yeah.
traveling in another country.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, it reminds me of I know Tony Robbins says progress is happiness. John Maxwell says growth is happiness, and we talk about this concept a lot because like for weight loss, for instance, it's not about the short term; it's about the long term, especially based on why you want to do it. But when
Mm.
you put those jeans back on that you talked about, and
Mm.
now they fit a little better, when you can go on a longer walk without aching, when you have some type of positive result that really helps continue on that journey, right?
That will keep you in the game, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and
And I'm
and I think
glad
the
you
same thing
mentioned that
works for
quote.
business too. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, for
yeah,
sure. If you feel like your business is better off and you're
yeah,
making better connections, and you have to feel progress, that's what matters. To be honest, the dirty secret is you don't actually have to be making progress. You have to feel like you're making progress, and that will keep you doing it. And I'm sure you will make progress if you keep doing it.
mm,
One of the things Tony Robbins says is that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And I like that line because success is deeply personal. Like we can think, if I say, who do you think of when I say success? You have some people that I would probably know their names, right, in your mind. But we don't know what their quest was. We don't know what they defined as success. We don't know. Let's say Oprah's dream, her success to her was being able to help as many people as possible, being extremely wealthy, and being anonymous. She failed.
right,
If I'm not saying that was her goal, but
right,
we don't know. I don't know her personally. So it's deeply personal, and that success has to lead to fulfillment, right? And it's not just an end date. And that's why I think progress is the key. I just think in general, when we say happy, like I'm happy in life, I think the right word is fulfilled. And I think fulfillment comes from feeling like you've made progress. I am a better human in 2025 than I was in 2024. I actually know that because I can tell you some things that I've learned and changed, and so I feel like that, and so I have that fulfillment. It's not like I'm going to achieve this, and then once
right.
I achieve that, I'm at the top of the mountain, and I guess I got to pick another mountain now, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I've heard Derek Jeter say something. I think it's originally Aristotle quote, but it's something to the effect of "What's won is done. The soul's true joy is in the doing." And so that's interesting
Mm,
because somebody who's won a championship, who's
for sure.
achieved, great success in business or in anything in life, like that feels good, but that doesn't last that long, right?
For
And so
sure.
when you say it's the progress, it's hard to have the progress without the doing, right? It
Yeah.
takes the doing to have the progress. So
Yeah.
it's that's interesting. I've never heard it put that
And
way, but
think
it
of how
helps me
quickly
tie
I
that together.
quit.
Yeah,
Think of how quickly I quit.
yeah,
I gave music lessons exactly 1 hour for the first 17 years of my life because I was like, there's no way I'm even going to make progress in this. So I quit. And I think if I kept going back, I would have been even more like dug into a hole thinking that I had this limiting belief, and who knows what would have happened, right? But like if that teacher would have walked up and said like, "Hey kid, what are you here for? What do you want to be able to do?" And if I said, "Oh, I really want to play this Beatles song," and he actually could have shown me a couple things, and I would have felt like I knew something leaving there, and then I would have been back. But if someone wants to learn how to swim and it's 6 months until you get them in the pool, I don't know how long they're going to be. They're out doing calisthenics and breathing exercises and stretching, and that's all great. Those are attributes, VO2 max. There's a lot of things you need to be a good swimmer, but I would say you could get those attributes by pushing me in the pool, having me swim from one side to another, and then saying, "Do it this way; it'll be easier."
yeah,
And then you keep correcting, and then the first hour, I feel like I made progress,
yeah.
right?
That's really cool. It kind of reminded me of my son a little bit. My son Charlie is a pilot. He'll get his pilot's license later this month at 17. He soloed on his 16th birthday,
No
and
way! Oh my
yeah,
god!
yeah, and he just loves it. And I think part of why he loves it is because his introduction to it was called a discovery flight. And a discovery flight is you go up with a pilot, and in this case, the pilot says, take the yoke. and you're flying your first time up an airplane. You know what I mean?
That's
So to your
amazing.
point, it's like he
Yeah.
got to experience that and feel it and be like, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
You
Like
know?
I'm in control of this thing right now.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
confidence and so now back to that quote, right? If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. You have to double click on that a little bit and say, if I think I can, why do I think I can? I need to convince myself. If I think I can't, I want to look into that too. Why do I think I can't? Right?
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
try something, see if you can get a quick win, and then you'll be even more interested in like, then it becomes a problem solving thing. Like I want to get to this. Now I want to be able to play 20 songs on the guitar or 50 songs. How do I solve this problem? Like you're
Yeah.
going to be interested in it, motivated, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. Breaking down a kind of bite size, like, all right, if I don't think I can achieve that, what if I can just learn to do this and kind of start stacking those wins or reasons, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
For sure.
that's cool. To kind of stay on the music thing, because I know we're wrapping up here. What do you have upcoming with music? Because, like I said, I had a cool experience to kind of go back and watch some of your stuff you did when you were younger, and then I saw the TED Talk, and I know you have some new things happening in the music world. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So yeah, I've been doing it for a little over 20 years, and like I said, I only had that one lesson when I was 7, which didn't help very much. But I have over 185 songs out on anywhere, any country, anywhere you can stream, buy, download, steal music. That's where you'll find my music. And I was early getting into iTunes. I think most people didn't know that you didn't have to be a major artist. And so I had kind of some early wins by getting a fan base. And also I did a couple of cover songs, which this was pre-American Idol and everything. And so people didn't know that that was legal. They thought you had to get permission, which you don't, as long as you don't change it. So I had all these, at one time, if you would have typed in Hallelujah, you would have seen 3 versions of that, and one of them was mine.
Yeah.
And so that song paid my mortgage for about 5 years.
Wow.
Right? I was just lucky, and that people gravitated to that version. So I release a new song about every 6 weeks, and I will be. I just did. You mentioned the TED Talk. I did a TED Talk called Unity here in Detroit, and at the end of the talk, I performed the song, my original song called Unity, which just came out, and it was great. I had everybody up on stage, or everyone that was backstage come up on stage and sing along because the song's called Unity. Probably shouldn't be by myself,
Right.
and the audience is all waving their arms and stuff. It was really cool. But I have a mix of kind of funny, silly songs, and also some of the deeper songs like Unity. And my next release, which is going to be out probably in June or so of 2025, is one of those very deep, kind of profound, I hope, songs with meaning, and it's very reflective, and it's called No Moment is Ordinary.
Hmm.
So yeah, if anyone wants to hear my music, if you can remember my name, Steve Acho, you can just type it in anywhere, and there my music will be.
Awesome. Excited to hear that, and we'll make sure we put that in the show notes at the bottom of the page there. So thank you
Okay.
for sharing that. So to wrap things up here, I got one final question for you. But before I do, is there anything we didn't get to talk about that you want to touch on? Is there a kind of a last thoughts, any message you want to put out there before we wrap up?
I think if I could leave people with one thing, when I do keynote speeches or training or consulting or whatever it is, I want to leave people blessed because I was there, but not wounded because I'm gone. And so I would encourage everyone to find and know for themselves that they have an enormous amount of potential that is untapped. And so it's not too late to learn anything, to learn a new language, to learn music, to learn how to code, to learn AI, whatever it is. I think this is something we didn't really talk about, but I think that we underestimate what we can accomplish and how much progress we can make if we focus, if we simply focus on one thing for literally 15 minutes to the exclusion of everything else, we underestimate what we can achieve. And most people aren't used to focusing most of the time because we're kind of proud multitaskers. Um, but I think you will discover your own enormous potential if you find something and you're able to focus on that and kind of make it a ritual to do like
Hmm.
a day or 3 times a week or whatever it is. So
Yeah,
you are more capable than you think. That would be my message.
I think that's very powerful, especially because I feel like we're in a time, unlike any other, where it's probably easier to go out and accomplish great things, but it's also easier than ever to do absolutely nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Well
And so
said.
it's that focus that
Perfectly said.
that makes the difference. So
Yeah. And it
very
can be
cool.
overwhelming too because the velocity of change is different, right? I mean, it took 7 years for the internet to reach 50 million people. When uh, ChatGPT came out, it reached 100 million people in 8 weeks.
Wow.
So, I mean, you can look back at every technology. I have a whole chart that shows, from the telephone to the radio to the TV to the internet to now. And it really is this hockey stick curve. So you're right. Now more than ever, we have to learn how to be adaptable, like how to adapt to the change in the technical environment, the political environment, the everything, in order to have any kind of whatever, however we define success.
Yeah.
Adaptable is the first thing.
Well, there's people paying a lot of money to have our attention, right?
Right.
And so it's going to get harder and harder to focus on
Yeah,
what we think is important and not what somebody else wants us to focus on.
for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, so I always end our podcast with one final question. And, my mission, again, is to lift others up. And I do that by working on myself, sharing what I'm learning, sharing, people like you who I feel like have just amazing wisdom and insight to come on and share with other people. And so, can you think of anybody else that I might be able to get on the show that you think would bring a lot of value and that really embodies what lifting others up is all about?
I do actually. I don't want to commit for her,
Yeah.
but one of my good friends is Lila Lazarus, and she's just an absolutely captivating speaker. And she was on the news for many years. She just has a gift for storytelling and lifting people up, and she is the same on screen and off screen, and has more energy at 5 a.m. on no sleep than most people do when they sleep in. She's incredible, and just has lots of wisdom to share. So
Awesome.
I think she would be great.
Yeah, I'd love to reach out to her and see if that's possible. And Steve, I'll just tell you that I have different people in my life that I find, whether it's online or in person, that I say I look up to them in these ways. And your ability to learn and speak another language, to be musical, something I always wanted to do, to be in great shape and with martial arts and everything. All things I look up to you for, and I just appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your heart with everybody. And I look forward to doing it again one day.
It's very kind of you. Thank you so much. Great
Thanks,
talk.
Steve.